Hi there, so in this video I wanted to discuss how your twin is a direct mirror to your relationship to self. Your twin cannot treat you differently to how you treat yourself, especially the more embodied that they are, or the more you're both at that embodiment level. These are not 3D connections. Like in 3D or in a lower dimension, you can treat people like it's not entangled with each other. You can treat people how you want to treat people without being influenced by how they're relating to self. But at a higher level, it's like you are responding, like reacting and responding energetically to their inner dynamic. So it's very difficult to love on them if they're not loving on themselves, for example, or it's very difficult to give to them if they're not giving to the self. Like you're impacted by their inner relationship, rather than being able to separate how you treat them with how they're treating themselves. And I've noticed this come up recently. Like it's happening that I find the more embodied that I'm becoming, the harder it is to relate to my soul connection friend differently to how she's relating to self. And I've got a little prop here, I wanted to give you an example of what's happening and how I'm sort of responding to that and showing her what she's doing within herself. So I need to prop my camera up here. Hang on. See if I can get it to sit there. Okay, so brought some plugs with you. So it's like we're connected to self, okay? And then sometimes people will sort of leave themselves and connect with someone else. But they're not connecting. This is like an attachment thing. They're unplugging from self and plugging into someone else. And then they're unplugging from them and plugging back into self. So when my soul connection friend stays here, we have like a harmonious dynamic, and I'm having this loving exchange with her, a balanced exchange, harmonious exchange. And then she connects with a man in her physical reality, who I'm going to discuss the frequency and being on the same level as me and stuff in a second. But basically what seems to happen is she unplugs from self, leaves me over here, and plugs into the man. So then what she ends up doing is pulling me into her and draining me by pulling me to fill that void within self and give to her. Which she doesn't really want to do, or she doesn't want me to give to her in that volume. It ends up I end up sending her 75 messages, and it's not in balance anymore. Because she's left herself and she's given over here. And it's not that, it's funny because she said ages ago that, do you expect me just to be single, to connect with you? And I'm like, no, it's not that at all. But what I am saying is don't leave yourself when you go and connect with someone else. Don't do this unplugging thing from self and plugging in over here and abandoning the self. Because that's when she creates this energetic response of receiving too much from me and not being able to give back to me, or not given to me. And yeah, it just feels like the connection goes off balance because she's left herself to go and connect over here. So it's you need to have a harmonious exchange with, it doesn't really matter if it's a male or female connection, but in this instance, I'm talking about a female connection that I have. It's she needs to stay here and connect over here without leaving herself to connect over here. Does that make sense? So I think this happens when people are connecting with something outside of self that's not aligned with the self. So, for example, I think if she was connecting with a man that was on the same frequency or the same dimension as her connection to me, it wouldn't matter. I think there's still an issue with leaving the self. However, like, I feel like she wouldn't receive out of balance from me if she was doing that, because she'd be given to me in like male form rather than, but what's happening is she's given to like sort of a male version of me in the past to her, but also in the past to myself, which is then sort of pulling me out of my center. And that's what I've noticed as well. Like it happened like the other day, and I haven't ever experienced this to this extent, but it actually affected me physically. Like it felt like my left hand side was getting pulled away from me, like my eye was going funny. I felt like distortion at my hip and stuff. It was like, and I've been thinking about it, and I think it's because I'm like a future version of her. Like I've integrated her in the future, so we can connect when we're detached from each other, and when she stays with herself and or gives to me within herself, there's this harmonious exchange. But as soon as she leaves the self or gives away from self, it pulls me sort of backwards to give to her, but not in a balanced way. It's like, and I've noticed that our conversation changes as well. We go from discussing just life and what's going on and sort of working things out together to trying to fix each other and fixing our expression and how we relate to each other and stuff. It's not balanced anymore. It's like we end up like trying to sort of work out the puzzle of the inside and relating, how we're relating to each other, rather than us being together as a whole and relating to the external from there, if that makes sense. So I think ultimately, to avoid this happening, like I said, it's, you need to stay connected to yourself. Like what seems to be happening with her is that she's attaching to the external. She's either attaching to me, or she's attaching to the other, or she's attached to both outside of the self. And what's happening is like she's sort of hooking into me for something, and then when she pulls the other way and gives away from self, it's pulling from me to give to her rather than giving to myself. Whereas in order to have a harmonious exchange with her, like, yes, I can communicate with her as a sort of past aspect in some respects, but like I need to be able to give to myself in order to have that exchange. And it's almost, it feels like I end up giving to her rather than giving to myself, and it's sort of inverting the flow where I'm giving backwards to myself rather than having a present exchange with that aspect. So yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to say on this. Yeah, it's like you have to, like, I think anyway, you need to be relating to, like, you should, like, I think you need to create secure attachment to the self and a secure sense of self and ability to stay with the self ultimately. But I also think you need to be connecting on the same level as your inner self. So it's like you need to be connecting with a man externally that's aligned with your inner masculine, because that's where the unplugging is happening as well. Like with this friend of mine, it's like when she's connecting to a man or attaching to a man that is not her equal, so she's having to unplug from herself and to connect with him. Whereas you should, with the right connection, the right present connection, you should be able to stay connected to self and connect with the other. You shouldn't have to leave yourself. But when you're not connecting with something that's aligned with you, then you're having to leave the self to connect with it. And yeah, it's like pulling you away from self. So then that's where I've been mirroring to her, of sort of in some respects pulling away from her or blocking her, because I've done that a few times, because it's like mirroring where she's blocking or disconnecting from herself. Like it's like it's almost like I'm not trying to do that. It's like I can't respond differently to how she's being within herself. So it's like if she's blocking herself, then I'll externally block her. Not really consciously choosing to. It's like that energetic response to her. And yeah, like, and then it's like I said, it's also pulling me backwards into giving to her. Because, and it's funny because she said to me, oh, like the other day she said something like, oh, I'm not going to distort myself to make you feel like you're receiving. And I was like, whoa, that's like quite a toxic way to relate to yourself. I'm like, it's not about so that I can feel like I'm receiving. It's so that your feminine can receive as well. It's like she's in the masculine saying, I don't want to give to my feminine. Fuck you. Like, and I'm like, it's not about giving to the other person. It's about having an equal exchange within the self, and then the external reflecting that to you. And also not disconnecting from self. Like she's had this dynamic, and it's almost like the lesson hasn't fully landed yet, because she's had this dynamic with a few different connections, particularly female connections, who block and unblock her and have this sort of insecure external relationship. And to me, it's mirroring her insecure relationship with herself, or her insecure connection with herself. So yeah, I'm finding that it's really hard to relate to soul connections, because I'm pretty embodied now. I'm finding it's really hard to relate to soul connections differently to how they are treating themselves, and I'm becoming, like, how I'm treating them or how I'm relating to them is becoming a mirror to how they relate to themselves. And I also think this is where the codependent and narcissistic dynamic comes in as well. This is like, because I've noticed some of the things that I've said to her, it's a bit like toxic, or a bit like it sort of goes towards that narcissistic end of things. And I think it's when she's attaching externally to the masculine and she's leaving her own masculine and becoming codependent, or entering into this codependent connection that's not equal to her in the now, that she's then pulling a sort of narcissistic dynamic from the other side, because she's creating this tension or this toxicity in her own inner relationship, which is then being reflected in the other. And it's not necessarily how they want to treat her, but it's like they're no longer able to treat her differently to how she treats self. So yeah, so my basic message here is that your twin will mirror you, and if you want to experience something different from them, then you need to sort of gain more awareness or mastery over the self, and of staying connected to self, and of having a harmonious relationship within the self, to then see that reflected. I think often we try to change the external person, or we want them to be different, but it's like they can't be different until we're relating to ourselves differently. Like when she stays connected to herself and when she's single, we have this like real balanced like exchange. Like, not that it has to be absolutely equal all the time, but it's like I'll send her 3 messages and she'll get 4 back, or I'll get 4 back, or I'll send her 10 messages and get 8 back. Like, it's like a reasonable balanced exchange. But when she leaves herself and goes and plugs into the man that's not aligned with the other half of her, or that she's having to leave herself to connect with, she's then pulling like 75 messages from me and sort of disintegrating me as that future aspect of her that has integrated her. It's like I can only stay connected externally to her if she's staying present and connected to self. And that's what I was trying to explain the other day, that I feel like hasn't quite got through yet. But I'm like, you need to have a good relationship with yourself, and you need to stay connected with self in order to experience harmony and maintain connection with me externally, and not leave yourself to connect with this man. And she's even made comments about who she's connecting with at the moment, that she feels like she's coming down from like this like massive high after she's been with him, and feeling like sort of disintegrated in herself. And I'm like, yeah, like you're doing that to me as well by connecting away from self. Like, we need to come back into balance and get both of our energies on the same level, and then connect externally. And this is also, just quickly, it's like, I think this happens when we externally seek the masculine, or we externally sort of attach to connections rather than magnetize them. Like with myself and her, we magnetize to each other in the physical, like I think I said in the last video. But with this male connection, she sort of magnetized him, but it was on the screen. She magnetized him on Instagram. She didn't magnetize him in the physical. So it's like, where she's connecting with her feminine and where she's connecting with this man is not on the same dimension. And she's having to like leave herself in one place to, it's almost like different levels of a house. And it's like her feminine connection is in the bedroom upstairs and her masculine connection is in the basement. And she can't connect with both in the bedroom or both in the basement. She's having to unplug from self in the bedroom upstairs to go downstairs to connect with the man in the basement, to then unplug from there and go back upstairs to connect with me. And I mean, sorry, but that's fucking exhausting inside yourself. Never mind anything else. But it's also creating this dynamic where I'm not able to stay connected to her, and I'm having to sort of connect and disconnect and connect and disconnect. And yeah, it's very interesting because, you know, up until recently I hadn't ever experienced this, or not to this level. Like, I'd sort of experienced it on an energetic level, but I'm really experiencing it in a physical level now, where I'm feeling like my actual physical self is being disintegrated when this happens. So I've had to like put a boundary in place between myself and her, not really because I don't want to stay connected with her. It's not that, it's that I'm not able to stay connected to her unless she can stay connected to self and have a harmonious exchange with self. Because it shouldn't be the case that her feminine is only able to stay connected to her when she's single, and then when there's a man in the picture, the feminine has to detach. Like, you should be able to do both, but you've got to come into balance in order to be able to do both. So yeah, if you have any questions or anything you want to discuss, just leave a comment after this video, and please like and subscribe if you like what I share. It really helps me get my message out and help people. And if you click the little bell for notifications, you'll get notifications when I post a new video. And I hope you're all having a great day, and I'll be back with more content soon.